Oprah, you are the patron saint of books and literature. Your presence here tonight has been a blessing, a benediction for us all. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Now I'm going to compose myself, and we will continue with this evening's celebrations with recognizing National Book Foundation's two incredible lifetime achievement honorees, Paul Yamazaki and Rita Dove. So first is the 2023 Literarian Award for Outstanding Service to the American literary community, which is given to recognize the honoree's remarkable dedication to expanding the audience for books and for reading. Past recipients include Lawrence Ferlinghetti, Dr. Maya Angelou, and most recently Tracy D. Hall, the former executive director of the American Library Association. And tonight's recipient is a lifelong bookseller who has paved a path forward for readers locally and globally. And here to present the award to Paul Yamazaki is 2011 Literarian recipient himself, Mitchell Kaplan. Native of Miami Beach, Florida, Mitchell is the owner of the storied Books and Books, the venerated establishment in Miami, and the co-founder of the Miami Book Fair. Y'all, it gives me good pleasure to welcome to the stage Mr. Mitchell Kaplan.
Well, wow. I want to thank Oprah and LeVar for those remarkable opening comments. And I'm also here to thank somebody who's a friend to all of us in this room, and is doing all of the kind of work that we heard LeVar and Oprah talk about. And I'm going to start with a little story, because we're among storytellers, right? So I was 18 years old once, believe it or not. It was 1974. I was an English major then, at that point, at the University of Colorado. And they ended up in Boulder from Miami Beach after reading a book by Jack Kerouac, The Dharma Bums. I had never before seen mountains or snow, but somehow I figured, as only an 18-year-old can figure, that my destiny was to hang out on a mountaintop, watch for fires, and write poetry. That this was Colorado instead of Oregon, and that unlike Jaffe Ryder, I was no poet, and wouldn't recognize a fire in the wilderness unless that wilderness included lots of palm trees. Didn't matter to me. I was heading west, I was on the road. And as you probably see where this story is going, at my first break, Thanksgiving weekend, I headed further west. I drove across the Rockies, straight for San Francisco, straight for City Lights Bookstore. Once there, I was in awe. So many books in such unusual conversations with each other. Every section unlike any I'd ever seen before. Browsers were everywhere, broadsides on the walls, and all those City Lights titles. Ginsberg was even there, browsing the poetry room. That night, he and Gregory Corso would be having a reading together just down the street. I found my heaven, and I only wished I could stay forever. I did strike up a conversation with a bookseller that day. What we talked about, I don't really remember in great detail. I do remember, though, that he was very gracious, very patient, and that he regaled me with the history of the store and suggested I might like that new City Lights anthology that had just been published, the one with that great Bronner illustration on the cover, the one I still have. Although there's no way for me to be sure, and this is a story, I want to believe that that bookseller on that day in City Lights was Paul Yamazaki. It probably wasn't, but it makes perfect sense if it were, because that trip and that bookseller showed me the possibility of what my future could be, and that's the kind of effect that Paul has. So let's just say it was Paul. And let me just say thank you, Paul. And tonight we all thank Paul. We gather to honor the remarkable work he has done for all of us for over 5 decades. Writers, readers, publishers, and booksellers. His commitment to the very deep waters of our literary life has made a difference, a profound difference. That Paul came to bookselling as a way to get an early release from a prison sentence rendered because of his activism is legendary, and it's so right. His well-developed sense of justice and inclusion brought a fresh vibrancy to City Lights when he took over as head buyer. And in a broader sense, his championing and passion for new and diverse voices and for small and independent presses set an early example for booksellers everywhere. He demonstrated that these voices and presses would find their readers when given a chance. He continues to be a catalyst for change, a transformational change that we witness today and each and every lay down Tuesday. I recently saw this post, I think it was by Ann Chelberg, and I thought of Paul. She writes, "This is what is great about bookselling. It's an embrace of the plural, whether within the store or broadly across the land." And broadly across the land, Paul's embrace of other booksellers is profound. His warmth, his humility, the way he listens, that smile of his, the joy he wears so well. He's a friend and a mentor to young and old, ones just starting out or those more established. And I've gathered a few of those voices for you, just a few. If I went further, there'd be hundreds. Melinda Powers of Bookshop Santa Cruz writes, "One of the qualities I love and admire most in Paul is his curiosity and the way it guides him with such kindness and humility. He's curious about the craft of bookselling, its myriad approaches. He's interested in his colleagues' perspectives, regardless of their experience, and he seeks out understanding through relationships, building bridges between writers, publishers, and booksellers, creating more space for everyone. Underneath it all is his love for the books, his keen understanding of the numbers, and his high standard of excellence, all of which he so generously shares, elevating us all." And this is from Jeff Deutsch of Seminary Co-op, who's a marvelous bookseller, but to me, he's more important as the publisher of a book that Paul is about to publish. It's by Paul, and it's called Reading the Room. And I've read an early copy of it, and I recommend it to this entire room. It's really remarkable. Jeff says, Paul Yamazaki has raised up generations of booksellers. He teaches by example, including the lesson that discernment and commitment need not compromise kindness and generosity. In Paul's peaceable kingdom, engagement, listening, and curiosity are the marks of greatness, and enthusiasm, the work. We are lucky to live in the time of Yamazaki. Well said, Jeff. Yes, we are. Miwa Messer, host of that wonderful podcast, Poured Over, writes, "Paul was the beacon I didn't know I needed when I met him 30 plus years ago. A cool cat, a dude who read everything, an Asian American bookseller. Paul held the door open for me, and I do the same because he taught me how. I stay because Paul stayed." Yes. And if you've ever come to any literary events like these, or the old BEA or the American Bookseller Association convention, you know that there's Paul and Rick, right? So this is from Rick Simonson of Elliott Bay. Another hand for Rick, too, I think. Of Paul, so much to say, but this, that his abiding interest in and attention to those who have come before our time, to those who are coming and will come after, and to the world this all happens in, bespeaks an old soul evident in him when he was young, and a young soul evident now that he is an elder. Paul Yamazaki carries the immensity and humility of being human with purpose, passion, and a radiant spirit that is rare among us. He does indeed. Square Books, the wonderful Square Books in Oxford, Mississippi. Yes, Rick. From Richard Howarth, the founder of Square Books, says, Paul Yamazaki, one of the nicest people I have known, is the wise and gifted bookseller who, for a half-century, has given his head and heart and joy to one of America's iconic bookstores and its community. What a pleasure and great good fortune it is to have known him as a model, mentor, and drinking buddy. I mean, yeah, drinking buddy. Thanks, Richard, I almost forgot that. Because, Paul, with a martini in hand, is an indication that all is right in the world, right? Anyone who's gone drinking with Paul knows that. And since I have the distinct pleasure of bestowing upon Paul Yamazaki the 2023 Literarian Award, I ask that all of us raise a glass in recognition of Paul's outstanding service to the American literary community. Paul Yamazaki, the literarian assistant.
I'm really stunned and humbled to be here. There's so many people in this room who've meant so much to me, who've made me look a lot smarter than I actually am. But it's to be the recipient of the Literarian Award is such a tremendous honor. It's not something that you seek out. It's not something that you aspire to, but it is what we've heard so much tonight, our passion and curiosity for the written word, for the book, for what the authors do for us. It's right now, as we live in such troubled times and such turbulent times, it is the writers who really kind of bring forward how we're able to kind of determine a course through our lives, but it is what? The whole world is like kind of shaped by what the writers do, at least from my perspective as a bookseller. There is so much that we do not, or I do not get without reading the books, without having the conversations. And so, as I stand here, as the current recipient of the Literarian Award, I have been preceded by 3 amazing booksellers, publishers who've directly affected me. But first, I would like to thank David Steinberger and the Board of Directors of the National Book Foundation, and Ruth Dickey, and the staff who've assembled us here, but not just for this evening, but for the work that they do constantly around the year, just like to bring writers and readers closer together. And that's what we all do together. We are the planks in the bridge towards building that closer connection. But it is the staff and board of the National Book Foundation that actually put those planks in place. And so we thank you very, very much for all of that. So we are kind of here not to hear me speak, but to celebrate the writers. And in this troubled time, it is the writers who really give us a guidepost to how we can move forward with compassion and humanity, and to be able to make kind of not preconceived notions of what we should be doing, but how the various kind of fonts that we can use to make our own determinations. So I've been really very privileged to have these amazing comments that Mitchell assembled. And so what's happened here, so Lawrence Ferlinghetti, Mitchell Kaplan, Orrin Teicher, all people who've directly affected my career as a bookseller. And so I'll spend a little time explaining exactly how they did that. So with Mitchell and Orrin, they were really able to create a foundation, an ecology, if you will, of the book world, of shape how we move forward, how we shape a sustainability. So for all the booksellers in the room, we know how difficult it is just in a day-to-day basis to create a sustainability not only for our stores, not only for our readers, but for our booksellers. And so it is Mitchell and Orrin who really created a template for us that we still follow, and it is through that conversations and the systems that they put forward that we can move forward like this. I wouldn't be standing here today without them, but most importantly, Lawrence Ferlinghetti, who was the 2005 recipient of the Literary Award, the first one that was given out by the National Book Foundation, had the wisdom to hire me while I was serving 2 concurrent sentences in San Francisco County Jail. And it is what Mitchell has done in Miami, what Lawrence did with me, is to show that if you don't shut doors, if you open the doors, there is so much that is possible. There is so much that we can do. The authors here today and who've been nominated on long list, short list, the ones that we as booksellers and librarians are able to kind of have the privilege of presenting to our readers, offer so many different bridges and pathways to think about how we resolve our various issues in the world today. So as we move forward, we have to kind of, each one of us, question how we do our books. It's for editors, for booksellers, there's always finite space. There's the economics of what we do, there's the space of what we do, and it is kind of the privilege of the bookseller that we're able to take for each one of our individual communities, one of our individual readers, how we're able to bring those readers forward. And I think one of the things that's so key, that what Mitchell has done in Miami is to show that if you open the doors, if you don't shut the doors, you will be able, people will come in, they will walk with you. And I think one of the major things for me as a bookseller over the years is that trust the writer, trust the reader, and you really don't have to think about much else, because if you have that trust, if you have that conversation, people will walk with you. And it is kind of after 5 decades as a bookseller, I can categorically state that trust is always there. And so for all of us together, we can like kind of continue to build those reading audiences. And I think right now what's so important that in the turmoil that we're facing right now, and we can see this with all the nominees and all the categories today, that each one of them gives an individual path for us to think about, to follow, to be able to kind of like cogitate upon and move forward. So I'd like to thank, all my planned remarks, I've just kind of thrown out the window, kind of like what Mr. Burton, what Ms. Winfrey, what Mitchell have all done have kind of so beautifully encapsulated what our purpose is here today. And so I would like to thank all of you so much for bestowing this upon me, to have these conversations, and to move forward. And so we know that there's a lot of work that we all have to do about race and class, about how the conflicts in the world are going, but it is the authors today and moving forward that will help us set those guideposts to have these conversations. But thank you, Mitchell. Thank you, Rick Simonson. Thank you for all the booksellers in this room. Thank you for like my colleagues at City Lights who've like made this all possible for me. And most of all, my wife, Sarah Chin, who kind of has guided me through this whole process. And so thank you very much.